They wished me dead when I lost my leg, even though they forced me to go there. It was their idea, their money, their betrayal. Hey. My name is Jason, I'm 32. Could I have ever imagined that my life would end up like this? I mean, not literally end, but turn into such a nightmare. A week ago, I was a provider, a brother, a son, and now I'm just a burden. That's what they call me, and it doesn't feel like a metaphor. It's just a fact that they now shove in my face from morning till night. But let me start from the beginning. It was less than a month ago when everything started. Back then, I thought it was just a job, just a temporary fix, just needed to push a little harder so everyone in the family could breathe easier. I worked as a software engineer at a mid-sized IT company. My salary was decent, allowing my wife Sarah and me to live comfortably and save up for a house. But my younger sister, Kate, always had problems, and the problems were always big. One time she made a bad investment, another time she got involved with a guy who dumped her, then she took out loans for some nonsense. This time it was about $80,000, and the bank was already threatening to repossess her apartment. Our parents, Edward and Martha, were in a panic. They adored her and were ready to do anything to keep her from being homeless, even though, frankly, she deserved to face the consequences. I had helped Kate out several times before, but this amount was simply unmanageable. Sarah immediately said, "Jason, no. These are her problems, and you shouldn't sacrifice our future for her endless mistakes. This is just blackmail now, emotional blackmail, and she knows it." I understood Sarah. She was right. We were planning to start the IVF procedure, and that money was crucial. But when I saw my mother's face, her tears and despair, her pleas that this was the last time, that Kate understood everything, that she would change, you know how it is. You break, because it's your family, your flesh and blood, and you can't just turn away, even if you know you're being used. I started looking for what I could do. Sell the car. Ask for an advance at work. I didn't even have half of it. That's when my father, Edward, proposed the idea. He remembered an old acquaintance who managed a steel structure recycling plant. The work there was dangerous, dirty, physically grueling, but they paid crazy money for a month-long shift, $30,000 cash, if you worked without days off and overtime. He said, "Jason, it's just 1 month. You take unpaid leave, you slog it out there, and we'll clear Kate's debt, and you'll have some left over for your needs. Just 1 month, son. This is for us, for Kate. No one else can help." He said it as if I should have been proud of this opportunity, as if I were a hero going to save my family from the fire. Sarah was furious. She said it was insane, that I wasn't a manual laborer, that it was too risky, and that Kate should deal with her own mess. She yelled that they were just using me, knowing I couldn't say no, and deliberately pressing my weakest point, my sense of duty. But I had already made up my mind, because I couldn't bear to see my parents suffer. I promised Sarah it would be the last time, that I would be extremely careful, and that in a month, we would return to our normal lives. I called the plant, made arrangements. I took time off work, lying that I was going to help my sick grandmother. I told Sarah I would call every night. The next day, I was already there, at that cursed plant in Indianapolis. The stench, the noise, the dirt. Everything was unofficial, based on a handshake, no contracts, minimal training. On the very first day, they showed me how the massive hydraulic presses worked, and how just a couple of weeks ago, one guy had put his arm in up to the elbow. I felt my heart sink. But I drove away the panic. I just thought about Kate, her apartment, my parents waiting, and the amount of money I had to bring back. I persevered, worked like hell, didn't sleep, ate whatever I could get. Only a week passed, but it felt like a year. I put my engineering aside, I became just a worker, a cog in this infernal machine. I called Sarah, she was cold but asked how things were. I called my parents and Kate, they were positive, saying everything would be fine, that I was doing great. No one asked how hard it was for me. No one asked if I was scared. Only the money, only the amount, only the debt. Even then, I started to feel that something in these relationships was off, that they only needed me as long as I could solve their problems, but I shrugged it off. I just wanted to finish this month and go back to my life. And then, exactly 2 weeks later, what was bound to happen, happened. I was working on feeding scrap metal into the press, it was the end of the shift, and I was dead on my feet from exhaustion. I was distracted for literally a second. The platform slipped, I lost my balance, tried to grab onto something, and my leg got caught. I don't know how to describe it. Not in the press itself, no, but in the mechanism, in the gears, in that damn iron jaw. The pain was so intense that I went blind for a second. I screamed, an inhuman, animalistic cry that was immediately swallowed by the factory's roar. I was lucky that an experienced worker, Hector, was nearby. He managed to pull the emergency stop. But it was too late. When they pulled me out, my right leg was just a mangled mess below the knee. I don't remember being taken to the hospital, I only remember the smell of blood, iron, and the piercing, screeching wail of the ambulance siren. I remember Hector's face, completely pale, and his words that I couldn't quite hear. When I woke up in the ward, my first thought wasn't about the pain, but about the fact that I wouldn't be able to finish the job. I wouldn't bring the money. And now, I'm lying here. 2 weeks have passed since I arrived here. They couldn't save the leg, of course. Amputation. I am now disabled, and my life has changed forever. I was crushed, angry, broken. I called Sarah, she came immediately, and she was the only one who didn't say a word about the money, just held me and cried. But when I called my parents to tell them what happened, that's when the worst moment of my life occurred. I said, Mom, Dad, I'm in the hospital. Serious injury. They amputated my leg. Their first reaction wasn't, how are you, son, or, my God, what happened? No. My father, Edward, said, what about the money, Jason? Did you manage to earn anything at all? My mother, Martha, through sobs, but not of pity for me, but fear that the money was lost, added, Kate, she'll be evicted. How could you be so careless? I lay there and stared at the ceiling. In that moment, I understood that to them, I was just an ATM with 2 legs, and now that one leg was gone, they had no use for me. It was like a punch to the gut. They weren't just worried about the money, they were blaming me. Blaming me for daring to become disabled, risking everything for them, and failing to deliver their salvation. I felt such fury, such burning resentment, that I wanted to smash the phone against the wall. Lying in the hospital, without a leg, I realized that their love was conditional, and this leg cost much more than Kate's debt, it cost my dignity. I just turned off the phone. Sarah took my phone and said she would call them herself and that I needed to rest. I saw her eyes, full of tears and some kind of wild, undisguised anger, directed not at me, but at my parents. She held my hand, and I felt that she was the only one who truly supported me. My entire life, all my notions of family, collapsed in that one phone call, which lasted perhaps only a minute. I didn't know how to live anymore, and the scariest thing was that I didn't know how to live with these people I called family. The silence in the hospital room after that call was heavier than any steel I had handled on the plant floor. Sarah's grip on my hand was the only tether to reality. She didn't need to say anything, the look in her eyes, a fierce mixture of protective love for me and pure, cold hatred for my parents, was explanation enough. She was my rock now, the only one who saw me, Jason, the man who had made a stupid, desperate decision, not the broken asset that had failed to deliver. The next few days were a blur of medical checks, pain management, and hushed conversations between Sarah and the doctors about prosthetics, physical therapy, and the absolute certainty that I couldn't return to my coding job immediately, maybe not ever in the same capacity. I was numb, but underneath the morphine haze, the realization of my family's true colors was hardening into something solid and unbreakable. When my parents finally showed up 3 days later, escorted by an incredibly tense Sarah who sat in the corner like a coiled spring. The air in the room immediately chilled. My father, Edward, was wearing his expensive-looking, slightly rumpled business suit, looking around the private room with distaste, as if my suffering was inconveniencing his schedule. My mother, Martha, clutched a cheap, wilting bouquet of grocery store flowers, her eyes red-rimmed, but not with grief, with anxiety. Kate wasn't with them. Of course, she wasn't. Where was the savior when the savings account was depleted and the savior himself was now non-functional? Jason, son, Edward started, his voice tight, skipping any pretense of concern. We need to talk about the financials. The hospital bills, your lost income, this is a disaster. We got Mr. Harrison, the lawyer I mentioned, to look at the situation with the plant. Since you are working off-book, it's going to be messy, but we might be able to squeeze something out of them for wrongful dismissal or something. He paused, glancing at my bandaged stump. But that takes time. And in the meantime, we need to cover Kate's mortgage immediately. The deadline is tomorrow. I looked at Sarah. She slowly nodded, giving me the signal that she was watching their every move. I took a slow, measured breath. The anger from the phone call had crystallized into something sharp and analytical, much like my engineering mind, only now directed at my own blood. Messy, I echoed, my voice raspy from disuse. You mean, since I didn't have a contract, they owe me nothing, and since I was doing an illegal side hustle, I can't sue them without implicating myself and potentially ruining your acquaintance, Mr. Harrison's client? I didn't ask it as a question, I stated the facts I'd pieced together from overhearing hospital staff discussions. Edward flinched. He hadn't expected me to be so lucid, so quick. Well, Jason, you're smart. You understand the situation. That's why we need you to think about what you can do now. Maybe you could talk to your old firm. See if they can take you back remotely. Even part-time. I almost laughed. Part-time coding while navigating the world in a wheelchair, learning to walk again, dealing with phantom pain. All so Kate could keep her new condo, probably bought with the last loan she'd maxed out. You want me to get back to work, I said, leaning back against the pillows, Sarah smoothing the sheet over my chest protectively, to cover Kate's immediate mess, even though I am currently healing from an injury sustained while trying to solve Kate's previous mess, an injury you both encouraged. Martha finally burst into tears, a theatrical, wet sound that grated on my nerves. Don't be cruel, Jason. We are your parents. We love you. But Kate, she's fragile. You know how much this means to her. We all sacrificed for this family, and now you. She trailed off, unable to finish the accusation, which hung in the air. Now you've become useless. Sarah stood up, her movements deliberate and slow, radiating menace. Excuse me, she said, her voice low and perfectly controlled, not the shouting match from before. Mr. and Mrs. Miller, Jason has just had a major, life-altering surgery. He is in excruciating pain. He is not discussing debt restructuring or mortgage payments right now. His focus is recovery. You will leave his room immediately. If you call him again before I authorize it, I will speak with security. Do you understand? Edward looked momentarily chastened by her sudden steel, a look he hadn't seen directed at him in decades, maybe never. He mumbled something about needing to speak to Kate and hurried out, dragging a sobbing Martha behind him. The door clicked shut, and the relief was instant, though the emotional wound remained wide open, bleeding heavily. Sarah returned to my bedside, her face softening instantly. I am so sorry, Jason. That was awful. No, I whispered, reaching for her hand again. Thank you. You were the only one who defended me. You were the only one who understood why I did it, and now you're the only one who sees what they did in return. For the next 10 days, before they transferred me to an acute rehab facility, Sarah managed all incoming calls. I found out through her that my parents had managed to secure a short-term loan from a distant, rich aunt, Aunt Carol, whom they hadn't spoken to in 5 years, to cover Kate's payment. They used my injury as the ultimate leverage, framing it as a tragic setback that they were covering for me so that Kate wouldn't suffer my misfortune. They made themselves martyrs. I listened to Sarah relay this news, and a dark thought started to take root. They needed money, desperately. They were willing to use the last ounce of guilt they could squeeze out of me. I had put my trust in them for years, believing the foundation of family was solid. Now I knew the foundation was sand, and I had just stepped off it. I looked at my empty pant leg, then at the neatly organized pile of insurance and legal paperwork Sarah had started compiling. I had given them everything. Now, it was time to see what they had given me in return. The insurance battle would be long, and the paperwork proving my employment was non-existent, which meant they saw me as a goldmine that had just exploded in their faces. But Sarah was already working on a counter-narrative. She was researching workplace safety laws, regardless of the off-book nature of the pay. She was my champion, and I realized that in losing a leg, I might have gained the clarity to finally save myself from the real danger, my family's expectations. The clock on our 1-month ordeal was still ticking, and I knew the next phase would be about fighting back, not just recovering. I needed a strategy, and Sarah and I were going to build one stone by stone, starting with the truth about that factory. The transfer to the rehab center in Atlanta was hellish, not physically. Sarah made sure the transport was top-notch, but psychologically, because it meant moving further away from my parents' immediate reach. Yet, they found a way to penetrate the new walls. It was exactly 1 week into my residency there, a period dedicated to learning the basics of existing on one leg and managing crushing phantom pain, when the calls escalated from anxious reminders about Kate's mortgage to outright demands. My physical therapist, a strict but kind woman named Maria, had to confiscate my phone twice because the non-stop ringing was affecting my focus during balance exercises. The core conflict, the ugly truth I had tried to ignore, was now being thrown in my face with venomous clarity. I was only needed when I was making money. My father called me, not my wife, attempting to bypass Sarah's blockade. He sounded different this time, less panicked, more aggressive. "Jason, we can't keep covering for you. Aunt Carol gave us a loan, but it has a condition: we need collateral. Your savings account. The one you and Sarah built for the house and the fertility treatments." I stared at the ceiling tiles, every fiber of my being screaming at the audacity. "The savings?" I managed, my voice dangerously level. "Dad, that money was ours. For our future. I lost my leg working for your daughter's mistake. You want my future too? Don't be dramatic, Jason." Edward snapped back, the veneer of civility completely gone. "You are incapable of working for the foreseeable future. That money is just sitting there. What good is a down payment on a house if you can't even walk up the stairs? We are talking about keeping Kate housed. She is your sister. You think your potential children are more important than your actual sister's stability?" The logic was so twisted, so utterly lacking in moral compass, that it actually stunned me into silence for a good 20 seconds. Sarah, sensing the shift in my breathing, walked over and snatched the phone off the bedside table before Edward could hear my eventual explosion. "Edward, this is the last time you speak to Jason about money. He is a patient under my care right now. If you try this again, I will file a restraining order based on harassment, and I will make sure your attempt to coerce funds from a severely injured patient becomes a matter of public record, including the specifics of the illegal job you sent him to." Sarah's voice was low, vibrating with lethal intent. "You want to talk about the plant? We can talk about workplace negligence. We can talk about the fact that Jason was never issued safety gear, never trained properly, and was pressured to work excessive hours to meet the illegal cash quota you secured for Kate. You wanted a hero? You got one, Edward. And now that hero has a very good lawyer, me, in spirit, and a very strong incentive to make sure the people who orchestrated this disaster pay for every single thing." The next day, the pressure came from my mother, softer but more insidious. She came in person, unannounced. Maria tried to stop her, but Martha played the frail, distraught mother card perfectly. "Oh, my poor boy," she wailed, leaning down to kiss my forehead, smelling faintly of cheap perfume and desperation. I know Edward was harsh. He's worried sick about Kate, you know how much she relies on us. But look at you. You've always been our strong one, our provider. Remember when you were 10 and you fixed the boiler that no plumber could touch? You are a miracle worker, Jason. You will walk again, you will code again. You just need to reassure us that when you do, you'll fix this hole for Kate first. If you transfer those funds, the stress will go away, and your recovery will be faster. Stress kills, Jason. You don't want to die on us now, do you? After all we've done for you. It was the ultimate gaslighting, flipping the cause and effect. My injury was now my fault because I wasn't recovering fast enough to satisfy their financial needs, and my future earnings were theirs to claim as compensation for the past. I felt the familiar, toxic pull of obligation warring with the white-hot rage of betrayal. I looked at my mother, truly looked at her, and saw not love, but a predator who had just discovered her prey was maimed but still breathing. "Mom," I said, my voice steady, powered by sheer willpower. "I will never touch that money for Kate's debt again. It is for my family. For Sarah and me. If you need money, perhaps you should ask Kate. She's the one who needs housing, isn't she? She's the one who is fragile." Martha recoiled as if slapped. "You ungrateful child. After everything. We gave you everything. This house, your education. You owe us." "You gave me nothing, Mom," I corrected her, the words ringing in the sterile room. "You gave me expectations that I had to meet with my labor. When I couldn't meet them anymore, you discarded me. I owe you nothing." The atmosphere became toxic. They left in a storm of accusations, calling me selfish, cold, a traitor. They claimed I was destroying the family over a leg. Sarah came in right after, holding a thick manila envelope. "They are done here, Jason. I just had a call with a specialist lawyer, not Harrison, someone who only works for the injured worker. They think we have a solid case against the plant owners for gross negligence, even if the pay was cash. The fact that your father knew the operation was unsafe and actively pressured you to go for the quick cash to bail out Kate. That's leverage. They tried to buy your silence with guilt. Now, we're going to buy our future with their liability." The fight was on. The month was running out, and the gloves were officially off. I had lost a limb, but I was finally gaining my life back, one painful step at a time, and I knew my parents were about to realize they had lost their ATM, not their son, and they were going to pay the price for confusing the two. The next 2 weeks in rehab became a strange sort of boot camp for my future life, one where my greatest enemy wasn't the prosthetic fitting or the steep learning curve of crutches, but the constant, suffocating pressure emanating from my parents. Sarah and I had officially retained the specialist lawyer, Mr. Davies. Davies was a shark, and he immediately smelled blood in the water regarding the factory owner, an old money local guy named Bartholomew Hayes, who actively skirted regulations. Davies' strategy was clear: sue Hayes for maximum damages, arguing gross negligence and emotional distress, knowing full well the settlement would dwarf the initial $30,000 I was supposed to earn. The irony was that this very lawsuit, which was meant to secure my and Sarah's future, directly meant Kate's debt would be covered 10 times over, making the initial reason for my sacrifice moot. This created a massive, unbearable moral dilemma, one that erupted during a tense Sunday visit. My parents, now aware of the lawsuit, I hadn't told them Davies was involved. Sarah had subtly leaked enough information to make them nervous, came armed with Kate. Kate, my sister, looked terrible. Not, "I'm stressed about eviction," terrible, but genuinely haggard. She sat silently while Martha and Edward launched their full-scale emotional assault. "Jason, you are destroying us," Martha cried, clutching Kate's hand. "You have the means to stop this. Davies can settle quietly. If Hayes gets sued, he will use his connections, and Kate will be the one who suffers the fallout. The loan from Aunt Carol is not a gift, it's a binding agreement tied to Kate's good standing in the community. If you sue, Hayes will make sure everyone knows exactly why you were at that factory, that you were doing illegal side work to bail out your financially irresponsible sister. Your career as a programmer will be ruined by scandal. Think of Sarah. Think of your future children. Edward leaned in, his voice a harsh whisper, the true threat laid bare. We know you've told Davies everything about the arrangement, son. We saw the initial deposition drafts Sarah sent. If you drop the suit today, we will sign over the deed to Kate's condo to you and Sarah as collateral for your future medical needs, and we will personally guarantee that Kate never asks you for money again. We will tell everyone you were temporarily out of town on an emergency engineering project. We protect your name. That's the deal. Take the guaranteed house equity, keep your career clean, and let the plant owner off the hook. It's a trade, your leg for your reputation and Kate's stability. I stared at them, utterly aghast. They weren't just asking me to forgive the injury, they were asking me to actively participate in covering up the crime, a crime they instigated, by letting the true perpetrator, Hayes, walk free, all to protect Kate's reputation and my perceived spotless record. The moral scale tipped violently. Do I seek justice and financial security for my future and the compensation I deserve for a catastrophic injury, knowing the resulting scandal will expose my family's ugly financial dependency on me? Or do I sacrifice my right to true justice and financial recovery, allowing the dangerous man who owns the factory to escape accountability, just to maintain a facade of a functional family for Kate's sake? Sarah, seeing my struggle, gripped my arms so tightly it hurt. She knew what this meant. If I backed down now, I'd be shackled to them forever, not by debt, but by a shared, dirty secret. Then came the twist. Kate, who hadn't spoken the entire visit, finally looked up from her trembling hands. Her eyes met mine, and there was no love there, no pleading, only a stark, terrifying clarity. He's not signing anything, Mom, Kate said, her voice surprisingly firm, though laced with panic. You can forget about the condo. Edward's face went from stern to furious disbelief. Kate. What are you saying? You need this. Kate stood up, wobbling slightly. It looked like she hadn't been sleeping well either, perhaps from the pressure of her debt, or maybe something else entirely. No, I don't. You two have been lying to me this whole time, too. You told me the $80,000 was a loan from a local lender you swore would be patient. You never mentioned Aunt Carol or the binding agreement. You told me if Jason got hurt, I needed to keep quiet so the lender wouldn't come after me. She looked straight at me, her eyes wide. Jason, the truth is, the $80,000 wasn't my mortgage payment. It was the initial down payment I made on a high-risk crypto investment scheme your father talked me into 3 months ago. It's gone. They just used the eviction threat to force you into that dangerous job for quick cash to cover their bad investment, not my housing. They lied about everything, Jason. They used me as the excuse to exploit you. The room went silent. My parents looked like statues carved from shock. My sister, the fragile centerpiece of their universe, had just confessed the entire scheme was a multifaceted lie designed to funnel my legitimate income into covering their financial mismanagement. They didn't just pressure me, they conspired against me, using Kate as the unsuspecting shield for their financial recklessness. My injury was now the collateral damage in their game of financial deception. The choice wasn't just between justice and reputation anymore, it was between exposing them all or letting them continue to destroy lives, including my own, under the guise of family duty. The clock for the decision was down to the wire, and the next move had to be absolute. The air in the sterile hospital room froze solid after Kate's confession. The silence that followed was absolute, a vacuum where months of manipulation, fear, and desperate hope had just been annihilated by 4 brutal, simple sentences. Edward and Martha stood there, their faces drained of all color, their carefully constructed performance collapsing faster than any steel beam under a hydraulic press. Kate, finally unburdened and terrified, looked at me with something akin to genuine remorse. I didn't move. I felt Sarah's hand tighten on my arm, a grounding force. My mind, surprisingly clear, processed the implications. The 80,000 wasn't about saving a home, it was about masking their collective financial incompetence, which had now cost me a limb. The moral dilemma, justice versus reputation, was instantly solved. There was no reputation left to save, only a structure of lies that needed to be dismantled entirely. I slowly turned my head to look directly at my father. "Edward," I said, and the sound of my voice was low, steady, and devoid of the warmth he had monetized for years. "You told me I was a hero for saving Kate's apartment. You coerced me into an illegal, dangerous job, knowing the risks, so you could cover up your own bad investment that you tricked my sister into. You blamed me when I got hurt because I stopped being a reliable source of cash flow." I paused, letting the indictment hang. "You didn't just ask me to sacrifice my leg for the family. You demanded it to cover your mistakes." Edward finally sputtered, trying to regain control. "Jason, you don't understand the pressure. We were trying to hold things together. Carol would have ruined us. You have to see, we did this for you too. To protect your name." "Protect my name?" I scoffed, a harsh, humorless sound. "You think a settlement from Bartholomew Hayes, detailing gross negligence, will hurt my career more than knowing my own parents engineered my disability to save their pride?" I then looked at Sarah. "Sarah, call Mr. Davies. Tell him the deal is off. Tell him we are not interested in a quiet settlement. We are going for maximum punitive damages against Hayes, and we are including every single piece of communication regarding the financial pressure and the nature of the employment as evidence of coercion related to the injury." Sarah didn't even blink. She pulled out her phone instantly. "Got it, Jason. We expose everything." Martha finally broke, collapsing onto the nearest visitor's chair, her sobs now genuine, self-pitying devastation. "You're throwing us away. You're destroying your own sister's life over money. You'll have no family left." This was the moment of truth, the final pivot. I looked at Kate, who was openly weeping now, realizing the depth of her parents' deception and her unwitting role in my near ruin. Then I looked at my parents, two people who had confused dependency with love. "You're wrong, Mom," I said, the finality in my voice like the closing of a vault door. "You're wrong about the money, and you're wrong about the family. I didn't lose my family on that plant floor. I lost them when I called you from the hospital. This," I gestured to the empty space where my lower right leg used to be, "is the physical price of my naivety. The real tragedy is that you don't even see the difference. You wanted a stable asset. You got a lawsuit." I looked over at Sarah, who was whispering intensely into the phone, drafting the next phase of our survival. "We are not destroying the family, Martha. The family was already destroyed. I am simply cleaning up the wreckage. The money from the settlement, when it comes, will secure our medical needs, our IVF, and our new life, far away from here. We will pay for Kate's actual housing debt, the one she actually owes, out of charity, not obligation, once the dust settles. But you too. You lose your guaranteed access to my income stream, and you lose the right to manipulate me with the word family. That's the end of the contract." I switched my gaze back to the ceiling, feeling a strange lightness despite the physical trauma. The month had been brutal, swift, and transformative. I had traded a leg for a harsh, undeniable truth. I looked at Sarah, and for the first time since the accident, I saw a real, unclouded future in her eyes. The fight for justice against Hayes would be long, ugly, and likely public, exposing everyone. But as I focused on the feeling of Sarah's steady hand, I knew that while my parents might have believed love was transactional, I had learned that true partnership, the kind that endures catastrophe, was not. It was about standing guard while the other person healed. The path ahead involved prosthetics, court dates, and rebuilding my career, but I would do it standing on my own 2 feet, or 1 foot in a titanium strut. The story of the Miller family was over. The story of Jason and Sarah was just beginning.